Hi, this is AJ from 5D Transformations. I'm here and I wanted to talk to you today already about MBTI, the beautiful subject that I really love. It's a wonderful tool on how to understand self better. And I wanted to, go a little bit further with some new videos comparing different things. So let's start with intuition versus sensing, right? Or we could say sensing versus intuition. They both work together, okay? They both need each other. And that's one thing we got to understand about these functions. At times I've heard people say things like, well, which function's the best? Which one's the most important? You see, the truth of the matter is that they're all equally important. And what happens is we all overutilize some and underutilize others. The goal that you ultimately want to reach as best as you can is balance. And when we talk about intuition versus sensing, you'll notice the two scales that you should pay attention to, but that others, might fall into one category more or the other category more. So it's sensing, right? This is a perceiving function. Sensing and intuition are perceiving functions, meaning before you think or feel any way about anything, you first have to see it, right? So whatever's in your face, you can observe. And so let's say there's a red car that drives in front of your face. Sensing is actually looking at the car, and then intuition would be the patterns associated with the car you're looking at. And the only difference is once you start thinking or feeling a certain way about that car, it's either going to be because you're relating to something sensory that's triggering something in you with the car. So the color, the shininess of the car, the way it's the characteristics of the car, you're either paying attention to that, or when you see this red car, it makes you think of something or feel a certain way about something. Because as soon as the car came into your vision, now your thoughts and feelings were able to process what was in its face. And in terms of intuition, it would jump to something that the car makes you think of or something of that nature. It'd be something where, oh, this car makes you think of this, or this car relates to this, or I was just thinking about a car. These are all intuitive perceptions, right? Or these are all thoughts and feelings based off the intuition as a perception. So both of these are important, right? Because a lot of sensors feel as though intuitives are in the air, because it's like we're looking at the red car. So why are you talking about all of these other things? Yes, I understand they relate to the car, but they're not the car. These are just ideas. And so as a result, the intuitive is missing out on all the characteristics of the car and experience, and they don't have an ability to feel and experience the car right here, because they're shifting to different scenarios based on their intuition, or to a different scenario, because some intuitives might say this car relates to this, and then I'm thinking about this, and while other intuitives might just say, oh wow, that car is exactly the car I wanted to get, right? And now that's more of a NI, or introverted intuition, which for you guys that study MBTI, you'll know that there's two forms of intuition and two forms of sensing. So keep that in mind. But regardless, it's intuition the moment your attention goes from the car to something related to the car. You've now left the car, right? Which means you've left the sensory processing world and you stepped into the intuitive world now, right? So some types are more comfortable just paying attention to the car, because there's so much to delve into with the actual car, right? Just as an example, like, wow, what are the features of the car? Let me see the inside, or you can have an intuitive, which they'll shift completely away from the car, so they'll miss the whole experience. But on the flip side, the sensor is so focused on the car, right, that when this person makes a connection to the car to something else, there's so many other things related to the car that can provide insight. Because to the intuitive, let me take a sensory person into the intuitive's world, because they might be like, well, what's the point of relating it to anything when this is the car? Well, right, the reality of the situation is that, even though you can do a lot of things with the car, to an intuitive, it's like a piece of metal. It's like, okay, the car's here. We can see it, we can touch it, but what's after that? Like, to a very intuitive person, a lot of sensory things can seem like basic, like, okay, it's a car. We've all seen a car before. We can see the rims. We can see the inside. This is nice. I get the gist. Like, this is a good car. Maybe if it was my car, I might pay more attention, but we get the gist. It's a nice car. Now let's talk about something more interesting related to the car. Let's notch it up another level. Now you're dealing with intuition, because, intuition is making relations, and that's how it moves through the world. So it's interesting. They're both very different in that regard. You're going to naturally pick up different information if you're a sensor day-to-day versus an intuitive day-to-day. So a sensor is going to have very practical information on what he can do moment to moment. They're going to be more so talking about what is, what's possible. And if they are talking about something that's not possible, or like maybe, you have some sensors that are conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. But if they are, you know what I mean? A lot of the time that's not necessarily their domain of prestige or preciseness in regards to what they're saying. They're not the most precise when it comes to conspiracies and things like that. Or, intuitives are pretty wacky when it comes to conspiracies as well. But I only say this to say, when a sensory-dominant person is looking at conspiracies, you got to realize that they're not as connected to that intuitive world of ideas. And that's where the other strength comes for intuitives, that sensors got to respect, is that intuitives spend so much time day-to-day with ideas that they have a very good grasp on which ideas are, out of the box versus which ideas are usable. Now, sensors, it's hard, because for sensors, they have a better grasp in terms of ideas being usable in the practical sensory world. But what I mean with intuitives is that when they put together an idea, they have a very keen sense of the preciseness of an idea. You got to realize, when you're living in an intuitive world, you're always dealing with ideas. So there becomes a hierarchy system of ideas, and it becomes so intricate. A sensory person might look at it like, these ideas matter, these ideas don't. Whereas for an intuitive, you have ideas that matter, ideas that don't, ideas that might be good for now, ideas that you might use later, ideas that might not matter now, but they might matter later. So just to give you an example, connected to what we talked about, the intuitive might come up with all these ideas about the red car, and you might be like, well, the red car is right here. But they might slip in the fact that, that red car made me think of James, and James actually has a connection with cars. Maybe we can talk to James to potentially get a good price for a car like that. See, intuitives will quickly come to these connections, and which open up possibilities that sensors can experience. So if the sensor is so focused on just the one car, they might miss out on these other opportunities. So the reality is, we have both of these experiences. I give an example of sensory and intuition being two people together, but in reality, we have sensing and intuition just within ourselves. So I'm basically describing the way your two functions work within your own mind. And the key is, you're going to naturally always stick to what you're used to. So if you're more of a sensor, there's only so much you can do in terms of pushing your intuition, and vice versa. If you're an intuitive, you can only push your sensing so far. But understand that for you, the more you understand the other side, the more you begin to unlock more potential and gems within yourself. And for all of my people that want to know, different ways to unlock your functions, that's something that I've done. I mean, I've unlocked extroverted sensing, and I'm an intuitive dominant. And let me tell you, when I unlocked extroverted sensing, I had a glimpse, like a week where it was very high-level extroverted sensing. I've also had a situation where I did that with feeling, unlocking certain things. But with sensing, it's a different reality from an intuitive. Just from the simple way that a sensory person looks at things and connects with things is very different than it is for an intuitive dominant person. Because an intuitive lives in their brain space so much, they're kind of disconnected from the physical. Where that feeling connection isn't as strong. So you have to understand that's the difference. Whereas for a sensory person, they're so connected. And one thing I said, I was like, man, when I was having this sensory explosion moment, I was like, man, I wish I could fly. And I asked my friend who was an ESFP, and I was like, man, they have extraverted sensing as their first function, right? So they're sensing dominant. And I was like, man, you ever wish you could just don't you ever feel like you want to just fly? And he looked at me, he was like, man, I be wishing to do that every day. I be wanting to do that every day. So you'll notice extraverted sensors have this explosive ability where they can be in the environment and get things done and just knock it out. They are the type that when you're like, hey, can you move this and do this? They'll go out and just knock it out, versus you explaining all these ideas, because then it feels like it's like you're lifting them up on a balloon away from the ground and they're just stuck in the middle of the air. Like, what? I have no power up here. Bring me back down to the ground where I can run around and make things happen. Whereas for an intuitive, they like to be on that balloon floating up, because all the sensory stuff on the ground level, it seems chaotic at times, and it's like, and also it could be chaotic or it could be too simple. Like, okay, we know what's here on the ground. We're looking at dirt, grass, or I'm in my room looking at the wall, watching whatever. So ideas open up an escape world for intuitives, and not an escape where they want to be escapists and they are out of touch with reality, but more so escape where they can explore beyond just what's in that room because of their mind and because of their ideas. And that's where we start seeing these amazing genius creations and realizations and technology moving forward. That you couldn't have that without your intuitive side, because that intuition, it has the ability to go beyond what's in the room. And so it's important that we want to utilize and honor both of these functions. There's a time and place for both functions to be used. And honestly, you want it to be a dance. So if you happen to be a sensory dominant person, you want your intuition to be I like to look at it as the masculine and feminine energy working together. So your dominant function, you want to act as the masculine energy. And then the backup one is the feminine. So if you're a sensory dominant, your intuition, you want it to treat it like the feminine aspect. So you don't want to deny it or, look down on it like, man, screw intuition. They're in the clouds. Our intuition doesn't want to look at sensing like, screw them, they're so basic. Instead, what we want to do is treat it like a relationship, because it is a relationship, because you need both. You couldn't have any intuitive ideas without looking at something in the sensory. And as a sensory person, you would basically be like a dog or an animal without your intuition, because you wouldn't have the ability to be outside of the thing you're perceiving, which gives you the insight to look at it from different dimensions. And that's how we have these different dimensions of thought. So you want to have a relationship with the two. And it might be like your wife might say, hey, well, you might be like, I want to do this. And she might be like, well, I know you want to do that, but here's what I'm feeling. And that's how our lower functions will be. They'll be like that nag, like, oh, I want to do it this way. And you're like, well, we're doing it this way. But you still know that your backup function has intelligence. It's telling you something the same way where your partner, like the feminine energy, still has your best interest at hand. So it might tell you, go a little bit slower or slow down or think about it. So you want to take that into account and then always make a balanced, firm decision based on the information these two functions are giving you. Remember, your main function isn't the one you chose, isn't the better function. It's just the one you use more often, that you're more comfortable with. You still make bad decisions with your dominant functions. And for a lot of people, they make a lot of bad decisions with their dominant functions. For a lot of people, maybe they should listen to their backup functions a little bit more. So keep that in mind. But on the flip side, there's some people who never take the act, that never step out, because they're always trapped in their head. They're always more so trusting what their lower function is saying, which stops them from taking the action that they should take with their dominant functions. So don't be afraid as well, you know. And so be brave, use your dominant functions, but just trust that instinct when it's telling you, I don't know, you know. That's a good way to balance it. But, you know, that's my quick spiel on sensing versus intuition. They both are powerful functions. The sensing, I'll do a video on this in the future where I'm going to talk about how the functions connect to the 4 elements. But I just want you to know that sensing is earth, right? And intuition is air. Okay? So earth and air, these are the perceiving functions. This is how you know things work together in terms of the sensory connecting with the spiritual. On our planet, we have the physical world that connects with the air, and when we say the air, also that includes, you know, all the molecules that come together to create an experience as air. So that can be H2O, you know what I mean? Hydrogen, oxygen, all these things exist in the ethers. They exist in the air, and this is how we're able to breathe and actually occupy a physical body. So as those two meet, we're able to have this experience of life. So understand that as your intuition and as your sensing connect, you'll begin to have a more complete experience. So keep that in mind, guys, and be on the lookout for more videos. Make sure to check out the Patreon that we have, the 5D Transformations Patreon, for exclusive information on MBTI and secrets on how to unlock your less used functions. Okay? So thanks for listening, and I will see you guys soon.